This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. Hello, welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chilinsky. My guest today is Christina Stanton. She is a 9/11 survivor, and she talks about what it's like in the aftermath and how you're grasping at straws to understand what actually just happened. We talk about the role of our communities in healing from trauma, and we also talk about how trauma never leaves you, and how do you find that new normal after something difficult happens. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And if you like the podcast, find us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, and leave a review. I'd really appreciate that. Enjoy this episode. Hey, Christina, I'm so excited to have you on the episode today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get started on the meat of the content here, I want to know, if you could have any superpower, what would that be?
I would love to see into the future. I think about that every once in a while.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to see how things turn out, how humanity progresses, how things, in a perfect world, literally, things would get worked out. And yeah. I wonder a lot how the future is going to be for us and our world. And yeah.
I wonder that a lot too. I think that would be pretty amazing. I hope it wouldn't be scary. I hope it would be encouraging and exciting.
Oh, I totally hope that humanity only gets more on an equal level, and there's less poverty, and there's more hope, and there's more global kind of a community. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Hope. I love that word, and I love that thought for our future. Thank you for sharing that. And tell us your story. So who are you and what do you do? And how is it that you and I are talking today about resiliency?
Yeah. So I am originally from Florida. I moved up to New York City when I was 23 years old to be an actress, or to give it a shot. Let me just say that way. And I moved to a city that was very expensive, and I tried really hard to make it work. And I was like, okay, I gotta revert to a day job here and to navigate this expensive city. And I decided to be a licensed New York City tour guide. So I passed a test, which is what you do in New York City to be a licensed tour guide. And one of my first gigs, I would say, is I was a walking tour guide of the original World Trade Center complex. And so I started doing that in 1995. And actually, it's funny because there's only a handful of tour guides that are around. We all know each other. It's actually a small world.
Yes.
That who were touring the original World Trade Center site, and who are still touring the 9/11 memorial now to this day. So it's interesting that I started my entire kind of New York City existence, my entire career and life, by being a tour guide of a place that ended up creating this huge lifelong impact on my journey. So to fast forward from there, I just wanted to give you some context. I met my husband, we married, and we moved about blocks away from the World Trade Center complex. I was like,
Mm,
this is great. I give regular tours of the complex, and now I'm a resident of the
right.
district where the complex is located, which is several neighborhoods. Mine is the financial district.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that morning of 9/11, we had just moved in the apartment. Our stuff was still in boxes. I was asleep. My husband was awake, and the impact of the first plane hitting the North Tower actually shook our building. My husband knew something crazy had just happened. He
Yeah.
ran and shook me awake and said something horrible's happened. We ran into our terrace, and we had this wonderful massive 300 square foot terrace that faced north. We lived on the 24th floor.
Hmm.
And so it faced the Twin Towers. It really framed them. It was totally in our vision. And what we saw were flames on either side of the building. We thought somebody had snuck in a bomb.
Hmm.
And what they tried to do in 1993, only 6 months before I moved to New York City. So I thought
Wow.
they finally done it. Somebody finally did. They snuck in a bomb and trying to in the upper floors and tried to take it down. When all of a sudden, over our right hand shoulder, the second plane came
Mm.
and went right over our shoulders, went right in front of us, and turned and went into actually floors 78 to 86.
Hmm.
And again, we were on the 24th floor, so there was not a huge amount of distance between the plane and us. But the
Right.
impact of that second plane going into the South Tower and our proximity to the World Trade Center complex actually blew us back into our living room,
Yeah.
our apartment, and knocked me out. And I remember waking up to our little Boston Terrier jumping on my torso and in kind of a frenzy. And my husband was yelling and screaming. And I remember him saying, "Do you want your shoes?" But I was obviously in panic mode, not quite comprehending what was going on. I just remember getting up and running out the door,
Yeah.
our 24th floor lobby. And even in that kind of crazed state, there was something that kicked in that said, "Don't use the elevators. Go down the stairs," which is good to know that what we learned as kids actually kicks in when you need it. So
Yes.
I started running down the stairs and realized, I, I didn't say anything to my husband, but he joined me soon carrying our dog. And so we ran down
Okay.
the 24 flights. As soon as I got outside, I realized I was in my pajamas without any shoes. We tried to go back into the building so I could get some clothes on. But even in that amount of time, they said, "No, we're using the elevators for evacuation only." But that
Yes.
was okay. Nobody cared what I was wearing, not wearing. Your instinct is to get as far away from danger as possible.
Yes.
And so for us, since we were south of the World Trade Center complex, and Manhattan is an island, that
Yes.
so we just thought, well, we have to walk south because north is the danger, but
Right.
south is the water. But
Right.
yeah, exactly. So we kind of ran out of land in which to find safety, but that's okay. When we got to Battery Park, which is the very tip of the island, the very
Mhm.
southern tip, thought we're okay, we're fine, we're away from the danger. But as it turns out, we really weren't, because when those towers came down, they covered us with the dust and debris. We were worried
Mhm.
that they were going to fall vertically. I guess I
Yes.
mean horizontally on us instead of imploding. And
Yes.
it was just a big, massive, chaotic scene where people were throwing themselves into the New York Harbor to try to swim to maybe Governor's Island. And my husband and I said goodbye to each other. It just seemed like the world was ending, and also it
Mhm.
definitely seemed like, as we were having trouble breathing because of the smoke and debris, that this was the end. And so
Yeah.
it was just one of those kind of almost near death experiences that just
Yes.
is it just was horrible. And watching people in a state of panic, and we did see deceased bodies. Yeah, like I said, it seemed like Armageddon. To fast forward from there, we were picked up by boats and dropped off in New Jersey.
Mhm.
And we didn't get back in our apartment for several weeks for many different reasons, mainly
Right.
because people were banned from going into the financial district. It was called the frozen zone. But it
Yes.
just started us on a journey that kind of got worse. My husband found out one of his best friends had died in the Twin Towers. Our dog got sick due to the 9/11 dust
Mhm.
that honestly he licked to try to clean himself, that had
Yes.
had glass in it that shredded his insides, and he did end up dying of 9/11 causes,
Mm.
related causes. And so it just felt like I wasn't sure we were going to emotionally recover from it. And we did suffer PTSD. We had to go to therapy for that. It was a long journey for us newlyweds. I was 32, my husband was 35, and we were just married. To start off our married life with these kind of dire circumstances, and feeling like there was part of me that just really it was just a hard time adjusting to that. And
Yes.
it ended up defining our lives. And really, all of our roads presently lead back to that day.
Wow. Wow. Christina, thank you for sharing that story. And you had the front row seat to this just tragic, horrific event. So, first, I want to say I'm glad you guys are okay. And just thank you for sharing your story with us. You have a story of resilience. So, what do you think about that word?
When I think of resilience, I think it's the inner strength that you have access to move on from a cataclysmic event in your life.
Mhm.
And I believe that we all have it. But I think it's a matter of how we access it, and if we can access it, to be able to adjust and move on. So I think that inner sanctum, or that inner resource that kind of guides us to recovery and acceptance and being able to move on and adjust
Yeah.
is key.
Mhm.
And whatever everybody's journey is, to access it and what that means for them, I'm
Right.
totally with them. I totally get it. I had my own journey and what it looked like for me, because I do think that our different personality types play into how we access that strength and how we utilize it and how we try to make it work for us so we can move on in some type of new normal.
Yeah.
So I really do feel like I respect people's journey, because I just know it's so different. And, my journey is different as well. But when I just look at it as our inner resource, and how we're able to access that to be able to adapt to the new normal in front of us.
Yes. Or I want to take a step back and tell you. So, as you know, I'm a survivor of the Boston Marathon bombing. But the concept of resiliency wasn't something I thought about as I was in the process of recovering. And then when I did hear the term resiliency, I thought it meant somebody else. I thought it was other people had this skill that I didn't have. I'm curious, did you ever think about resiliency and how you were recovering as you were recovering?
That's an interesting question. What in the aftermath, when I was trying to grasp at straws of really, like, what the heck was all that? I really gave my brain some good time to try to sort through what the heck it was. For me, what that journey looked like is I was literally trying to wrap my brain around what was that,
Yes.
just so I could. And for me, what that ended up being was kind of a lifelong journey to
Hmm.
understand all the elements of it. It's
Hmm.
almost like I was consumed with reading. And I'm sorry for the noise. I'm actually outside
Okay.
because it's a peaceful place out here. So what I was trying to do is I would watch everything I could on TV. I'd watch everything. I'd read every newspaper I could, just to understand, like, what was happening, what were the elements, who did this to us, why they did, what was happening to all of those almost 3,000 people who died,
Mhm.
how are their families, how did the day play out. And I know that can seem like a strange rabbit trail, but
Mhm.
for me, one of the first starting points was just to really get a grasp on just the whole attack, and
Yes.
and around the country, in Shanksville and Pentagon and Al Qaeda, and most importantly, the 3,000 people who died,
Yeah.
because I really just felt like I wanted to understand their journey.
Yes.
And so that's really was my first step. And then the second step came from where do I fit in with this?
Hmm.
So for me, that seemed, yes, again, that seems like a very strange way to start off a recovery journey, but it was something my brain kicked into of like, what was that all about? So after that, I did start acting out in different ways. I was
Hmm.
really having a hard time sleeping. Because I have a lot of energy, I think my body moved to kind of a manic stage
Hmm.
that was the problem sleeping is because I had too much energy to sleep.
Yes.
I just wanted to walk and move. So that was part of the journey is I needed to go to therapy, which I did,
Hmm.
and talk through and to get my brain to calm down. And that
Yes.
was actually a long process for me is to just calm down, get my brain to slow down
Hmm.
because it just was on this kind of constant manic phase.
Right.
So now that's what it was for me. And one last thing that was really important during that time. And again, it might sound strange to somebody who has never kind of lived through this, but this type of a event, but I attended so many makeshift memorials in the city. There
Hmm.
were a ton all
Yes.
over the city. Kind of communal mourning and communal gatherings that happened in several parks, such
Mhm.
as Washington Square Park, Tompkins Square Park. There was a lot of concerts and just ad hoc gatherings. I wrote a book about it, and I detail a lot of those gatherings that I spent a lot of time going to because I found for me, again, personality type, being around people who are communally mourning was very comforting to me.
Mhm.
Even when I got COVID, and I got a very bad strain of it, again, I think it's 9/11 related. One of the first things I did was to join an online group of
Mhm.
people who had it as well.
Yeah.
For me, the community, reaching out to people, being comforted by people, being with people, and walking through all these horrible things was extremely helpful. To
Yeah.
be alone would not have boded well for me. I
Yes.
needed community. I needed people. I need to be around people. I need people like-minded who have sympathy, empathy for each other,
Mhm.
and who are mourning. So those are some things. So I would say communal memorials, communal gathering, to really try to understand that day by reading and researching, to also go into again therapy just because I had to calm my brain down. But
Right.
that was the goal, is to calm it down so
Right.
I could process.
Right. It's interesting to hear the piece of your journey that you wanted to learn as much as you could about what was happening and kind of understand just the details of the attack and what happened to the other people who were in the attack. That was something I experienced as well, wanting to,
Mm,
I don't know if it's put this layer of understanding or this more intellectual layer versus the emotional layer of what was happening, but that resonated with me when you shared that. What do you think people misunderstand about trauma after having your own experience of it?
Miss, that's a good question. What do I think people misunderstand about trauma? It really kind of never leaves you in a way. It becomes, when I say new normal, that's such a great term. I'm so glad somebody came up with that term. I feel like that's a new one because it really is so accurate. There's a lot going on in those two little words. Is it's a new normal that you are basing your reality in, that you can't avoid it. It becomes bedrock and, like literally cornerstones for launching you
Mhm.
into the future and launching you into your life, but yet those stones are always there.
Yeah.
I talk about 9/11 a lot. Still a tour guide, and like I said, I'm a 9/11 memorial guide. I give
Mhm.
regular tours weekly, sometimes every day for months. And I enjoy sharing And I never get anybody saying, wow, you're still talking about it. No, I never get any kind of pushback, or I cry almost every single time I talk about it, which is which is a lot. So I never get any kind of like, wow, she's crying after all these years. But I would say, like, what's probably helpful for somebody going through a traumatic event is to understand that it's always going to be with you, but you can launch yourself from that. And it can be woven into your present and future story in a productive way that honestly can even be beneficial to others. I subscribe to a religious faith that believes that you can interweave, your experiences that will eventually come out for good for not just you, but for other people. And
Right.
that's important to me because you would love to be a resource of help
Right.
for others. And not that I hope that people go through terrible events, but again, since other people have helped me,
Mhm.
community, I want to be kind of pass it on and pay it forward and be there for others when they're going through hard times, just like others have been there for me.
Yes. Yes. Well, I want to say thank you for the work that you do and sharing your story and giving these tours and talking about it, because that is a key piece in helping educate people about not only the event itself, but the trauma. And to see someone like you all these years later being able to share your story, I think people can actually see resiliency in action.
Right. I mean, you can, again, how you weave it into some kind of a trauma into your future is up to every single person.
Yeah.
But for me, I found it extremely important to be able to point to that trauma, let others know, because it is a shared global event, and that it definitely doesn't need to be forgotten. We don't need to forget those 3,000 people
Right.
who died. So I feel that there is value in my continued sharing in 9/11. If not for me and my trauma, it's just the remembrance of those lives that were cut short. There's so much value in that, of course. So I definitely feel call to do
Mhm.
this,
Yeah.
and it's absolutely an honor to do that. And so I definitely feel it's potentially one of those things I was put on this earth to do, and I take it seriously.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So, we've been talking a bit about personal resiliency, the things that we individually do to, help ourselves after a trauma. But what do you think about the role of our systems or institutions in helping people heal from trauma and in supporting resiliency?
I think I got all into this trauma informed therapy, which is a
Mhm.
relatively, I feel like, new term, or maybe it's just new to me. But I feel that therapy has gotten really great and really advanced in dealing with trauma and cataclysmic trauma. And I can't recommend it enough because, just relying on family and friends is one thing, but being able to get particular help from somebody who has a specific training is just crucial. And
Mhm.
I also think that religious institutions have gotten on board with understanding that if there's anything that they can do to reach out to the community to help heal, help to be agents of healing, that is a crucial point that we
Mhm.
need. So I do feel like it's not just one faith. I feel like I've seen a lot of different faiths adopt measures of offering support systems to
Mhm.
people who suffered trauma, and I'm happy to see that. But I really think that we're not islands, and I know that I'm an extroverted person, and that other people are introverted, and so it's a different lens that we would look through life. But I think when it comes to trauma, that we just can't be islands. Whether you're extroverted or introverted, we do need people. If just a therapist, but in a perfect world, we probably would do better to turn to a community,
Mhm.
even the introverts and the extroverts among
Yeah.
us, because I just think we live in community, we can help heal each other, and that's a crucial step.
Right. And as you just mentioned, if you're looking at someone who belongs to a particular church or synagogue or mosque, that there are that is also a community that we can turn to. And as you say, these communities offer support for the folks in their community, which is, I think it can be easy to isolate and want
Yes.
to be
Yes.
alone with what's happening. And you really clearly show how important community can be for folks who are healing.
I remember when I got COVID, which was mid-March in 2020. So clearly I was pretty much the first case that most of my friends knew of.
Yes, that's very early.
And unfortunately, I got a really bad case. I was hospitalized a couple of times. A doctor even told me I had about a 50% chance of surviving it. And by the way, I do believe it's because 9/11, inhaling that dust, did compromise our systems, which is, I totally believe I got a bad case, probably all the way back to how 9/11 has affected my health long term.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was in the hospital, couldn't speak because I didn't have the lung capacity. I would turn on the TV, and of course, every channel was featuring terrible statistics and tales and news about how COVID was just running rampant. So I couldn't talk on the phone. I couldn't go through honestly like social media because it was the same thing as the news, as turning on the
Yeah.
TV. So right away, Facebook groups had formed of people who had COVID, and I joined them right away. And here I am in the hospital, and even the doctors didn't know what to do for me. They clearly, people didn't know anything really.
Right. That early. Yeah.
So we were figuring it out together. So my online, I would write and said, I'm losing my hair, or we'd all compare and contrast notes of what was happening to our bodies as this alien had invaded it, was trying to honestly kill it. And
Yes.
so not only was it important because we were almost a step ahead of the healthcare, who was just as flummoxed as everybody, but that was an instant community. And sometimes when I think back, I think that potentially that community could have kept me alive, because it really was mind over matter in some of those days. And it was that community and us supporting each other. And some people say, I want to give up. This is, and because, some I would say, this is such a painful experience. They're like, no, we were literally egging each other to live.
Wow.
And in a very real time sense.
Yes.
And actually do credit it in part with why I'm still even here, because it was touch and go, especially on some specific days.
Wow.
So that's what community can do. And no matter, again, what situation you're in, but I can say that in a firsthand experience that community was pretty crucial to all of us. And it's funny, it's been several years, obviously, since then. I'm still part of that community, and we will still reach out to each other and say, hey, anybody here from March 15th, 2020? And some of us still remember each other's names, because we were very important to each other in that very crucial time period.
Right. As you say, that's an example of how vital the supportive community can be as you're dealing with something difficult. And in this case of COVID, that wasn't the aftermath of the event. That was actually helping you get through the event itself.
Right. It was a play-by-play.
Wow.
It really was. And sometimes I wondered what it would have been like if we had social media during 9/11. What would that have looked like? How would that have been? What kind of community online would have formed? And because I know there's communities now, like for instance, I profile some folks who, like my husband's friend in college and his family, they're all in the community with each other as survivors or as family members of those who died on 9/11. So I know that there's community there. I do wonder what it would have been like to have a community as it was happening. But I know, again, for the COVID, that community was pretty crucial. Another thing that I remember specifically that we were doing when we were trying to help keep each other alive during that time was a lot of us egged each other to focus on gratitude. That was a huge thing.
Wow.
And I could see it literally play out. I mean, somebody would say, okay, what are we grateful for today, y'all? what's up? What are we grateful for today? And I'm like, I'm grateful I'm in a hospital. I'm grateful that people are tending to me. I'm grateful. Actually, in my situation, I was grateful to be away from my loved ones. I know that that's not how it played out for everybody, and I totally understand it. But
Mm-hmm.
in my case, I felt so infectious, and I just was glad that I was not putting other people in harm's way to be going through, to give them something I was so painful I was going through.
Right.
And so we would list the different things that we were grateful for. And yeah, of course, we also listed when it was a bad day. It's not like we
Yes.
were Pollyanna about it, but there were some key things. I remember thinking, wow, gratitude really is important. I saw it play out in real time.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's easy to forget, I think, how important that something like that can be, and being grateful for what you do have instead of focusing or in addition to the things that are going wrong. Because obviously,
Right.
in your case, you did have to be thinking about the things that weren't going right. That was important. So, what do you think is the most important lesson about resilience that you learned because of your experience?
Obviously 9/11 was once in a lifetime, and hopefully it was once in a lifetime. But at 32, I really had not seen much trauma in my life. It had been kind of going along at a little clip, but now at 53, I see that life is full of suffering and drama, and there's pretty much nobody who comes out unscathed in
Mhm.
that. So the resilience is, and especially now that I have this perspective, is that what are you going to do when life throws you a curveball,
Mhm.
because it throws everybody one. And I think as a 32-year-old, I really didn't think there was curveballs in my future, or the most of a bad breakup of somebody in high school or something like that. But we, as humans, we get some tough stuff,
Yeah.
and we all are going to have to use those resources at one point or another, or sink or swim, or, because that's the whole thing. If we don't have some kind of access to those resources, things might not turn out so well. We might choose unhealthier measures
Right.
to deal with the disappointment and being upset over some of these uglier curveballs. So I really think resilience is, I'm glad I learned at an earlier age that it's not going to be a smooth ride,
Mhm.
because I ended up accessing that several times. And I felt like the more I accessed it, the better I got at being able to move on and say, what does that mean? Don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. Not
Yes.
that 9/11 was definitely not small, but it did put a lot of things into perspective of what is. And
Yes.
and so that's, I even was thinking that something kind of bothered me the other day, and I was like, "Oh, but boy, isn't this a small thing?" And I think it just puts a lot into perspective of what's worth getting upset over, what is okay. Now I have to, all guns flying. I need to really, really take care of myself right now. I
Right.
need to access some self care. I need to practice some self care. This is a biggie. This is tough. Give myself some grace. So I feel like it's a lifelong journey and it had opened up that Pandora's box of, are you going to sink or swim? And also, again, gaining perspective of what is a small thing. And it's like, oh, I got this. Yeah, I've been through 9/11. I got this.
Yeah.
So I feel like I say that a lot. I feel like it affects my day to day of what I get worked up over, and what I know, nope, I need to really deal with this, and I need to practice. Again, self-care is a big thing. And I
Mhm.
know when it's time to practice self-care. This is on the bigger end, and I need to just take some stuff off my calendar, and I need to sit, and I need to sleep, and I need to eat well, and I need to turn off the noise, social media, turn off the TV, and
Mhm.
do some self-care, because yeah, this is a bigger one. I need to chillax right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gave me a lot of perspective.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. At the beginning of the call, we talked about the word hope. So I'm curious, what is giving you hope now?
So I have to say, in a personal way, my faith gives me a lot of hope. My faith
Mhm.
is about hope. And so I believe that inherently the earth is full of hope. that we were given hope as humans. And so I do access that and I do believe in that. But I think apart from faith, what gives me hope are people. I just think people are incredibly inspiring to me. I am constantly inspired by people and their tales of how they were able to overcome and how they're able to love and how they're able to forgive and how they're able to move on. And I get a huge amount of hope and inspiration from other people and their stories of resilience. I live off it, really, endlessly interested in it. And I have to say, along with my faith, I look to other people. Now, obviously, there are landmines out there, or people who mean harm to other people. I'm talking about people who truly overcome things in life, come out the other side, help people and love people and are able to love people. And yeah, I love those stories. I can never hear enough.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So we're getting towards the end here. How can our listeners reach you?
So I've written 2 books. They're both on different platforms, but I guess the very basic is Amazon. My author name is Christina Stanton. But I've also written over 50 articles. I'm a tour guide still, but I'm a full-on writer. And just like I mentioned that I love stories of resiliency myself, I write a lot of stories of resiliency. So I have a website, ChristinaRayStanton.com. That is a collection of my articles. And I would say about 90% of them are people who inspired me that I ended up writing about their story.
Oh,
And
lovely.
some are faith-based and some are not. And I think even the ones that are faith-based, if we don't subscribe to the same faith, we can all, again, get inspired. And so that's how you can get in touch with me.
Excellent. I'll put a link in the show notes for everybody so we can all be inspired by these stories that you are sharing. So thank you so much for sharing your story and talking about how important resilience is. And I like that we're leaving with a message of hope.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did. So if you'd like to learn more about me, Manya Chilinsky, I work with organizations to help understand how to create environments where people can thrive after difficult life experiences. And I do this through talks and consulting. I'm a survivor of mass violence, and I use my experience to help leaders learn about resiliency, compassion, and trauma-sensitive leadership, to build strategies to enable teams to thrive and be engaged amidst difficulty and turmoil. If this is something you want to learn more about, visit my website, www.manyachilinsky.com, or email me at manya@manyachilinsky, or stop by my social media on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks so much.